We're always talking about carbon credits, but have you ever stopped to wonder what it actually costs to prove a project is making a difference? What's the real price tag on trust in this market? Well, today we're going to find out. We are diving deep into the fee schedule of Verra, one of the biggest names in the game.
So here's our roadmap. We're going to follow the money. First, we'll get to know Verra. Then we'll trace the costs a project faces, right from the initial idea to the fees for every single credit, all the way to the final transaction. We'll even look at the fees that keep the whole system afloat. Let's get into it.
All right, first things first. Let's set the stage. Who exactly is Verra, and why are they so important in this whole conversation?
Okay, so think of Verra as the referee in the big game of climate action. They're not a project developer themselves. They're the ones who write the rule book and make sure everyone's playing fair. They set the standards that certify everything from a forest protection project to a plastic waste cleanup. They are the gatekeepers of quality.
So you have a brilliant idea for a project. How do you get it into the system? Well, it all starts with the cost of entry, that initial investment you have to make before you've even generated a single credit.
It's pretty much a three-step process to get started. First, you've got to open a registry account. Think of it like a bank account, but for your credits. That costs $750 to open and another $750 every year. Then, you pay a fee just to get your project idea listed, and finally, you pay a registration fee for the formal review where Verra makes sure your project actually meets their strict standards.
Now, check this out. The costs are different depending on what kind of project you have. A carbon project under their main Verified Carbon Standard, or VCS program, has pretty high upfront fees, almost $4,000 for the review. But a plastic waste project? A bit cheaper. This tells you right away that the process is tailored, and certifying a ton of CO2 isn't the same as certifying a ton of plastic.
Okay, so your project is officially in the pipeline. Now we get to the core of it, the fee you pay for every single unit of impact you create. Here it is, the number that really drives the carbon market. 23 cents. That's what Verra charges to issue one verified carbon unit, a VCU, which stands for 1 metric ton of carbon dioxide that's been reduced or removed from the atmosphere. That is the fundamental price of proof.
But hold on, look at this. For a single plastic credit, the issuance fee is $7. 7! That's about 30 times more than a carbon credit. This is a huge signal that verifying plastic reduction is a completely different animal, probably way more complex, and with its own unique market dynamics.
But let's circle back to that 23-cent carbon fee for a second, because there's a really important catch. The fee isn't based on how many credits a project actually gets in the end. It's based on how many credits they claim they're going to generate before the final audit.
And Verra's own example here makes it crystal clear. Let's say a project claims 100,000 tons. They immediately owe Verra $23,000. But what if the third-party auditors come in and say, nope, only 50,000 of these are legit? Well, the project still pays the full $23,000. All of a sudden, their cost per credit just doubled. It's a powerful incentive to not overstate your claims.
And on top of that base fee, projects can also pay a little extra for what are called labels. Think of these as special certifications that show the project has other benefits, like helping local communities or protecting biodiversity. It adds a few cents to the cost, but it can make those credits way more valuable to certain buyers.
All right, so the credit is born, it's been issued. What happens at the end of its life? Let's talk about cashing out, the fees for when a credit is traded or ultimately used to offset emissions.
And again, we see this huge difference. Transferring or retiring a carbon credit costs just 2 cents, but for a plastic credit, it's 50 cents. That's 25 times more. It just keeps reinforcing that these are two very distinct markets with very different cost structures.
So far, we've only talked about fees tied to one project or one credit. But what about the system itself? I mean, who pays to develop all the scientific rules in the first place? Let's zoom out and look at the fees that power the whole ecosystem.
It really boils down to two main things. On one side, you have methodology development. If you invent a brand new way to measure carbon sequestration, for example, you could pay up to $15,000 to get that recipe approved by Verra. On the other side, you have the auditors, the third-party watchdogs, who pay Verra thousands of dollars a year just for the privilege of being accredited to check projects. This is the foundation of the system's integrity. But here's something really interesting. Verra doesn't just charge for new methodologies, they also want to encourage them. So they've built this clever rebate system that actually pays innovators back when their new method gets used.
And here's how it works. If you develop a new methodology, for the first 1,000,000 credits issued using it, you get 2 cents back for every single one. As it becomes more popular and more credits are issued, the rebate goes down a bit. It's a great way for innovators to get back some of that initial 15 grand they invested.
Okay, we've gone through a lot of different fees here. Entry fees, issuance fees, transaction fees, system fees. So let's pull it all together. What's the big picture? Why does this all matter?
And one important thing to remember is that this isn't ancient history we're talking about. This new fee schedule is being rolled out as we speak. The really big changes, like the core issuance levies, just took effect in January 2025. The market is actively adjusting to this new reality.
So if we stack it all up for one single carbon credit, you could have the 23-cent issuance levy, maybe a 7-cent fee for a special label, and then a 2-cent fee when it's retired. That's 32 cents, right there. That's the price Verra charges for the proof behind 1 ton of climate action.
And ultimately, that's what this is all about. These fees, all these little cents added up, are what pay for the infrastructure of trust. They're what make it possible for a ton of carbon to mean the exact same thing, measured with the same scientific rigor, whether that project is in Brazil or in Indonesia. Without that, you don't have a global market, you just have chaos.
But that leaves us with the million-dollar question, doesn't it? Are these fees the necessary cost of building a high-integrity, trusted market, or do they accidentally create a huge barrier to entry that shuts out smaller, community-led projects that can't afford the upfront costs? It's that classic tension between high standards and broad access, and it's a debate that is far from over.